Picture this. The year is 1947. Trains are pulling into stations across a land that has just won its freedom. But something is wrong, terribly wrong. There's no cheering, no music, just a terrifying, deathly silence. Why? Because these trains aren't carrying celebrating passengers. They're filled with the dead.
So let me ask you a strange question. Can you inherit a memory? I mean, can you actually feel a pain for something you never lived through? It sounds impossible, right? But for millions of people across South Asia, it's not just an idea. It's a living reality. They call it a ghost pain, a deep, collective ache for a wound that was carved into their history over 75 years ago. So how on earth can a trauma from that long ago still haunt the present?
Well, the answer has a name: intergenerational trauma. And look, this isn't just about grandparents telling sad stories. We're talking about a trauma so deep, it can literally be passed down through generations, becoming part of the very fabric of a community. And get this, as we're about to explore, it might even leave a chemical mark on our very biology. Welcome to Veiled Histories, where we bring hidden stories to light. Okay, so to really understand this ghost pain, we have to travel back to one single pivotal year that didn't just tear a subcontinent in two, it tore millions of individual lives apart.
1947. I mean, this was supposed to be the moment of triumph, the year the British Empire finally packed up and left India. It should have been nothing but celebration, right? The dawn of freedom. But for so many, that joy was completely swallowed by one of the most brutal, bloody divisions in modern history.
So let's set the scene. After centuries of rule, Britain is on its way out. The pressure is on to divide the land and fast into two new nations, a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. Now, a monumental task like that would require careful planning, compassion, deep understanding of the people, right? Yeah, well, that's not what happened. Not even close.
This is Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India. He was the man in charge of overseeing Britain's exit. And he made a critical and ultimately catastrophic decision. He rushed it. He took the original timeline and moved the date of independence forward by 10 whole months. This left just weeks to draw a border that would slice through ancient lands, villages, and sometimes right through the middle of people's homes.
And this quote says it all. It was laden with the threat of catastrophic consequences. To make the tragedy even worse, leaders on all sides had promised minority groups that they'd be safe, that they could stay in their ancestral homes. But as those hasty new borders ignited an absolute firestorm of chaos, those promises were violently shattered. The result of this rushed, chaotic decision was the largest and one of the most violent mass migrations in all of human history, a wound so deep it is yet to heal. Just try to wrap your head around that number for a second. 15 million people uprooted from everything they had ever known in just a few months. And we need to be clear, this wasn't some orderly move. This was a desperate, panicked flight for life as sectarian violence exploded across the land. The great writer Saadat Hassan Manto captured the pure horror of it. People who had been neighbors for generations suddenly turned on each other with unimaginable brutality. The very trains that were supposed to carry people to safety, they became rolling slaughterhouses. The human cost was just staggering. Up to 1.5 million people were killed. But here's something really important to understand. This single event wasn't experienced the same way everywhere. The tragedies that unfolded in the provinces of Punjab and Bengal were devastatingly different. You can really see the difference here. Punjab was like a wildfire, incredibly brutal, concentrated violence that led to a near total exchange of populations, all in a matter of months. But Bengal, that was a slow, agonizing burn. The migration was mostly one way, and the violence came in waves that continued for decades. These are exactly the kinds of hidden histories we are committed to telling. And if you believe these stories matter, you can help us by hitting that like button, subscribing to Veiled Histories, and ringing the notification bell. So, this brings us back to that central puzzle. Many of the survivors, just completely overwhelmed by the trauma, they chose silence. They rarely, if ever, spoke of the horrors they'd witnessed. So if the stories weren't being told, how did the pain manage to travel down to their children and even their grandchildren? The answer is that trauma doesn't always need words to be transmitted. In fact, psychologists have identified a specific pattern that explains how this happens non-verbally, especially when the memories are just too painful to speak aloud. It's called the cycle of selective silence. It usually starts when a child asks a survivor about the past. The survivor, trying to shield them from the horror, gives only the bare facts, avoiding all the raw emotion. The child senses the unspoken pain and learns that this topic is off limits, so they stop asking. But the trauma doesn't disappear. It gets transmitted in the silences, the anxieties, the unresolved grief. And what's wild is that modern science is now finding that profound trauma might even leave a chemical mark on our genes through a process called epigenetics. And this isn't just a theory. A recent study actually measured this trauma, and the results are just stunning. The mean score for the children of survivors is 2.30. You'd think it would fade with time, right? Well, for the grandchildren, the third generation, the score is 2.42. It's actually higher. The data shows the trauma hasn't faded. Its echo is just as strong, sometimes even stronger, 2 generations down the line. So here's the crucial point. This isn't just some historical fact or a psychological curiosity. This unhealed, inherited trauma has very real, very serious consequences today. That ghost pain from 1947 is still a powerful force on the world stage. It continues to shape national identities, it fuels political rhetoric, and it defines the incredibly tense relationship between 2 nuclear-armed neighbors, India and Pakistan. The lesson here is universal. When you draw borders on a map without humanity, you create wounds that can bleed for generations.
Which leaves us with one final, haunting question. If a collective wound this deep is buried in silence, if it's never truly acknowledged by all sides, can it ever really heal? What is the true cost of forgotten history? And what is our responsibility today to remember?